Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the podcast, Porter-Pedia, which explores the life, work, and world of Cole Porter. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week
Oh, me too.
because we're tackling a piece of source material today that completely shifts how we talk about American music.
It really does. We have a genuinely exceptional document in front of us, and it pulls absolutely no punches in its central thesis.
No, it really doesn't. And before we get into the weeds here, I want to take a quick second to acknowledge you, the listener. We know you are here as the crucial third person in this conversation.
Right.
You're likely tuning in because you want to cut through the endless noise out there. You want to avoid the massive information overload that comes with studying musical history.
Reading dry encyclopedia entries and academic text.
Exactly. And you just want to get straight to those brilliant aha moments about one of history's greatest, most fascinating musical minds.
If you want to understand the mechanics of genius without feeling like you're sitting in a stuffy lecture hall, you have come to the exact right place.
That is the mission today. So let's set the stage. Our foundational text for today's episode is a meticulously curated document titled Porter-Pantheon.pdf.
Which, honestly, calling it a document almost feels too clinical.
It does.
It's essentially a manifesto.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that the musical theater world of the 20th century was this incredibly crowded mountaintop. You had these undeniable, towering geniuses all working at the exact same time.
In the exact same few square miles of Manhattan.
Right, all reshaping the American stage. But this text makes a very bold, highly structured argument. It claims that Cole Porter isn't just on that mountain with the rest of them.
No.
The argument here is that he stands at the absolute, undisputed summit, alone.
It's a hugely provocative claim. I mean, when you think about the company he was keeping in that era, people who literally define the American songbook saying he is the undisputed king requires a lot of evidence. But the source material backs this up by focusing on what it identifies as his secret weapon. It's a concept the document calls the art of range.
The art of range. I just love that phrase. It sounds like a superpower.
It does.
And in the context of songwriting, it really is. Let's unpack what that actually means. The text establishes Porter's unique position by contrasting him with his peers.
While other legendary composers mastered one specific lane.
Or maybe one specific type of innovation, like integrating jazz or perfecting the romantic ballad.
Exactly. Porter, on the other hand, was protean.
He didn't just have a signature style. He had an entire fleet of styles, and he drove effortlessly in all of them.
To really understand why this flexibility equals greatness, we have to look at the historical context of how musical theater typically worked in the 20s and 30s.
And frankly, how it still works today for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. Usually you have a strict division of labor. You have a composer who writes the music, the harmonic structure, the melody, the rhythmic drive.
Right.
And then you have a lyricist who writes the words, the rhymes, the narrative poetry. They're two different minds trying to find a compromise.
It's like a director and a screenwriter trying to make the same movie. They might both be brilliant, but there's still two separate people bringing two distinct life experiences and vocabularies to the table.
They have to negotiate.
Right. The lyricist might say, I need 2 more notes here to fit this amazing rhyme, and the composer might say,
If I add 2 notes, you ruin my melodic arc.
exactly, the push and pull. But the text emphasizes how incredibly rare it is for a single creative mind to possess elite, simultaneous command over both of those domains.
This is the core concept of unified authorship. Cole Porter had literary brilliance. He could write lyrics that function as standalone poetry.
Or as incredibly high-level comedic verse.
Right. But he also possessed a deep, sophisticated harmonic intelligence. He didn't need to hand his melody over to a wordsmith to find the right syllables.
And he didn't need a trained composer to set his brilliant poetry to music. He was the architect of the building and the interior designer simultaneously. And think about what that dual command actually unlocks. This is the part of the document that really got my wheels turning. When you are writing the words and the music at the exact same time, inside the exact same brain,
You achieve this perfect, seamless integration.
yes. The text points out that Porter's rhymes literally shape the musical phrasing. The music isn't just a vehicle to deliver the words, and the words aren't just labels slapped onto the notes.
They're born together.
They are. The rhythm of his spoken language dictates the rhythm of the song. It is a completely unified artistic intention.
And that unity is precisely what allows him to be so adaptable, to have that range when you control all the variables, the tempo, the harmony, the internal rhymes, the cultural references.
You can pivot from one genre to another with total authority.
Exactly. You aren't dragging a collaborator along with you, trying to convince them to try a new style.
Yeah.
If you wake up and want to write a sweeping operatic tragedy today and a gritty, cynical jazz standard tomorrow, you just do it.
Your brain contains the entire toolkit.
Right.
So to prove this thesis, to prove that this unprecedented flexibility makes him the absolute greatest, the source provides a curated gallery of 7 specific songs.
7 masterpieces that showcase an astonishing stylistic whiplash.
It's like walking through different rooms in an art museum where one room is surrealism, the next is hyperrealism, the next is abstract expressionism.
Then you slowly realize they were all painted by the exact same guy.
It's wild. So let's walk through this gallery together. I want to start in 1928 with a song that pretty much everyone knows, or at least knows the concept of. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
The text categorizes this as his sophisticated novelty song.
This is really the song that established him as the supreme chronicler of urbane wit.
The core structure, as the document notes, is built as a catalog. It's a list song. He's systematically listing creatures, birds, bees, educated fleas, who are all succumbing to this basic biological impulse.
But wait, let's talk about that impulse, because it's not just a cute little song about animals holding hands.
Definitely not.
That's what I love about the analysis here. The source points out how Porter disguised bold, frank sexual suggestion beneath a massive, glittering layer of elegance and humor.
The phrase "let's do it" is inherently provocative.
Oh, yeah. In 1928, during Prohibition, with the morality police patrolling Broadway, you couldn't just come out and sing about sex. So he wraps it in this sparkling intellectual playfulness.
It's a masterclass in euphemism. And what's fascinating is the deliberate rejection of the typical sentimentality in the era.
Right.
If you listen to standard Tin Pan Alley songs from the late 20s, romance is usually depicted with saccharine earnestness.
Moonlight and weeping willows.
And holding your girl's hand on the porch, yeah. Porter completely bypasses that. The text uses a brilliant phrase to describe the tone of this song. Ivy League decadence made danceable.
Ivy League decadence made danceable. That is so evocative. It makes you picture a very specific type of person.
Absolutely.
You are at a speakeasy, you are dripping in diamonds, you are slightly drunk on gin, and you are getting a masterclass in biology and cultural trivia.
And let's look at the mechanical architecture the source provides regarding the song's structure. It describes it as an expandable list.
Which is a crucial piece of musical technology.
Because the song is just a list of examples proving a thesis, you can keep adding verses indefinitely. You can swap them out depending on the audience.
And in doing so, Porter wasn't just finding words that happened to rhyme, he was curating cultural references. The text explicitly compares his rhymes to cocktail party currency.
Which is such a great way to put it.
I want you to picture being at a high society party in Paris or New York in the late 1920s. To survive in that environment, you need wit. You need to drop the right names, know the right avant-garde trends.
Be slightly irreverent, but undeniably smart.
Yes. Porter took that exact, terrifying social dynamic and turned it into a musical form. He's constantly winking at the audience, signaling to them, I know what you know.
It flatters the listener. It makes you feel smart just for getting the joke.
But the true genius is that it remains incredibly accessible. He manages to be erudite, referencing specific types of Lithuanian birds or Boston beans, without being alienating.
Walking that tightrope between highbrow intellectualism and mass commercial appeal is incredibly difficult.
It is high comedy, but the tune still swings. It has a rhythmic bounce that makes you want to tap your foot.
Okay, so that's 1928. Porter has firmly planted his flag. He's the undisputed king of the witty, slightly naughty, sophisticated list song.
If you were a critic at the time, you might reasonably think, all right, I get it. That's his lane. He's the clever, cynical guy.
But then, the text takes us to 1932, just 4 years later. The musical is Gay Divorce, starring Fred Astaire, and the song is Night and Day.
And this represents a massive, almost unbelievable tonal shift from that comic sophistication to elemental monomania.
Monomania is the perfect word, as the source uses it. It implies a complete, unhealthy fixation on a single idea.
Think about the lyrical structure of Let's Do It. It's expansive. It's jumping all over the globe, looking at different animals and social classes. It's looking outward.
Night and Day does the exact opposite. The focus narrows down to a terrifying pinpoint. Night and day, you are the one. That's the entire thesis.
The imagery strips away all the cleverness, all the cocktail party references, all the jokes about educated fleas.
And becomes entirely elemental. He uses imagery of the sun, the moon, the ocean tide, and burning desire.
Let's dig into the music theory for a second, because the analysis in the text really zeroes in on the rhythm and harmony here, and it's mind-blowing.
It really is.
Most pop songs of the era start with a nice flowing melody. Night and Day starts with a repeated single note, over and over.
It's a ticking clock.
It's a heartbeat. The source points out this hypnotic, almost incantatory rhythmic motif. It literally mirrors the feeling of actual psychological fixation.
When you are deeply obsessed with someone, your brain doesn't think in flowing melodies. It loops on one thought, relentlessly.
Porter translated that agonizing psychological state directly into the melody.
And he pairs that relentless rhythmic drive with an unusual harmonic structure. The melody shifts between major and minor keys in a way that feels very unsettled.
It departs entirely from the standard, comforting Broadway patterns of the time.
It feels distinctly modern. It feels like a psychological thriller. There's no social commentary here. It is pure, unadulterated emotional expression.
Now, hold on. I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
We're saying this is a massive shift, but couldn't you argue that Night and Day is still just a love song, just like Let's Do It was a love song?
Right.
Are they really that far apart in the grand scheme of things?
They are universes apart in their intent. Think about the total abandonment of irony required to write Night and Day.
Right.
When your entire brand, your entire public persona, is built on being the smartest, wittiest, most cynical guy in the room, the most vulnerable thing you can do is to stand up and say something completely sincere without hiding behind a joke.
That's Duhar. It is a song where the singer is observing love from a safe distance, making fun of it.
While Night and Day is a song where the singer is trapped inside love, being destroyed by it.
That is the real aha moment right there. Porter proves with Night and Day that he can be intensely, painfully sincere without being embarrassing or slipping into that saccharine Tin Pan Alley sentimentality we talked about earlier.
He commits fully to the darkness of the emotion.
The document highlights this contrast beautifully. It notes that many writers can be clever and many writers can be earnest, but almost no one can oscillate between the two extremes flawlessly.
The leap from the urbane mischief of Let's Do It to the profound romantic intensity of Night and Day is so vast, it genuinely sounds like it was written by a completely different artistic personality.
And yet it's the exact same mind. You literally have the ultimate cynic and the ultimate romantic living in the same head, sharing the same piano bench.
Which leads us perfectly into the next era of his career. Because once Porter established he could do the elemental and the obsessive, he didn't just abandon his cleverness.
He went back to the Liz song and decided to perfect it.
Exactly. We arrive at 1934 and the apex of the comic catalog. You're the Top.
It was him figuring out the mechanics of the Liz song, You're the Top, from the musical Anything Goes, is him taking it to the Olympic level.
The core concept here is a virtuoso display of one-upmanship. You have two lovers who are essentially competing to flatter each other using the most extreme, disparate comparisons possible.
Let's look at the mechanical architecture of this song, because the text makes a huge point about this. It's not just a random collection of funny items thrown together.
The engineering is staggering.
Every single line has to perform multiple functions simultaneously. First, it has to scan rhythmically. Second, it has to land on the correct internal stresses so the singer can actually breathe and articulate the words at a fast tempo.
And third, it has to deliver a punchline that actively builds the energetic momentum of the song, rather than letting it dissipate.
He achieves this with a precision that the text describes as machine-like.
Let's talk about rhyme schemes for a moment. He isn't just rhyming the ends of the lines, the AABB structure we are all used to. He's using dense internal rhymes.
He's using feminine rhymes, where the rhyme spans multiple syllables.
And he's doing all of this while navigating an incredibly bouncy, syncopated melody.
The examples the source provides are just breathtaking. It points out the brilliant juxtapositions of high art and low culture.
Think about the lyrics.
In one breath, you are the Colosseum, you are the Louvre Museum, you are the absolute pinnacle of human civilization. In the next breath, you are a bounding, bouncing piece of chewing gum.
He rhymes a symphony by Strauss with Mickey Mouse.
The cultural layering there is doing something very specific. He's elevating the mundane, the chewing gum, the Mickey Mouse, by placing it on a pedestal next to the Louvre.
And simultaneously, he's slightly deflating the pretension of high art by making it rhyme with cheap pop culture.
As the text notes, Shakespeare coexists with everyday consumer items. It's a cultural panorama. I was thinking about this when reading the document. Could you even write a song like that today?
It would be tough.
Imagine trying to write a modern, You're the top. You're the Mona Lisa. You're a slice of pizza. It just sounds clunky.
Porter makes it sound effortless.
He's flattering the audience again. He's saying, I know you're educated enough to appreciate a Strauss waltz, but I also know you're hip enough to know what's playing at the movie theater. It is brilliant.
But then, just as we think we have him pinned down as this manic, energetic list maker, the text shows us another pivot.
Within the exact same musical, anything goes.
In the exact same year, 1934, we get the absolute epitome of urban cool. I get a kick out of you.
Let's talk about tonal whiplash. This song operates in a completely different emotional register.
The text identifies it as his great urban jazz standard.
The core concept of the lyric is built entirely around negation. The singer is listing all these incredible, thrilling, boundary-pushing things: drinking champagne, sniffing cocaine, flying incredibly high in an airplane.
And dismissing every single one of them.
They give me no kick. They are bored by the extremes of the Roaring Twenties. The only thing that gives them a thrill is the person they love.
The tone is so different from the breathless enthusiasm of "you're the top." It's dry, it's conversational, it's very restrained, almost weary.
And the text explains exactly why jazz musicians, from instrumentalists to vocalists, loved this song so much, which is a crucial piece of the puzzle regarding his legacy.
Right, because Porter wasn't a jazz musician in the traditional sense. He was a wealthy, Yale-educated guy who lived in the Waldorf Astoria.
So why did the jazz world adopt him?
Because of the space he left in the architecture of the music. The source notes that the song became a staple because the melodic lines are incredibly elastic.
He uses triplets against a 4/4 time signature, which creates this inherent swing, this lazy, dragging rhythm.
The harmonic progressions are sophisticated and inviting, but they aren't entirely predictable. He isn't writing a blues song.
And crucially, he isn't trying to imitate African-American musical idioms wholesale, which a lot of Broadway composers of that era attempted with varying degrees of success and authenticity.
He wasn't playing dress up. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
Exactly. Instead, he writes a structural framework, a sophisticated chord progression that actively invites interpretation.
He provides a foundation that jazz musicians want to build upon and improvise over. That distinction, as the text points out, demonstrates deep structural sophistication rather than mere stylistic borrowing.
The humor of the song arises from the singer's restraint, and the deep emotion is hidden just beneath that cool, glassy surface of wit.
I love how you can just close your eyes and see the visual vibe of this song.
The text perfectly paints it. It sounds like a man or woman in evening wear leaning against a piano in a smoky Manhattan club at 2 in the morning.
It is the absolute epitome of modern, urban, ironic detachment.
You can practically feel the cold martini glass in your hand just listening to the opening chords.
And that ability to project such a specific, tangible milieu, to build an entire world through both the lyric and the melody, is a highly specialized dramatic skill.
It's world building within the confines of a 3-minute song.
World building, yes. Which is exactly what he does, but on an even grander, more shocking scale in Section 4 of our source document.
We are moving into the exotic and the operatic, because apparently Manhattan and Paris weren't big enough playgrounds for his imagination.
In 1935, he writes "Begin the Beguine."
This is a massive structural leap. The text categorizes this as the exotic romantic ballad.
The core information here is that this is a sweeping, unusually long, almost symphonic composition based on Caribbean dance rhythms.
And to understand why it's a masterpiece, you have to understand what it's breaking away from. Let's break that down for the listener. What was the standard rule that Porter is shattering here?
At the time, the absolute ironclad rule of commercial songwriting was the 32-bar form, typically an AA-BA structure.
Think of it like a sandwich.
Exactly. You have your main melody, the A section, that's a slice of bread. You repeat it, another slice of bread. Then you have the bridge, the B section, that's the meat, a totally different melody to cleanse the palate.
And then you return to the A section, the final slice of bread.
That structure was efficient, it was memorable, and it fit perfectly on a 78 RPM record.
And what does Begin the Beguine do?
It looks at that sandwich and throws it out the window. Begin the Beguine is an astonishing 108 measures long.
It doesn't neatly repeat. It arcs, it builds, it detours, it expands. It entirely defies standard Broadway conventions.
The source discusses how Porter absorbed these global influences, specifically the rhythm of the Martinique Beguine dance, to create an incredibly immersive, nostalgic mood.
And it's not just a cheap trick, right? It's not just, let's put a tropical beat under a normal song.
No, the text points out that the dance itself, the Beguigian, is a lyrical trigger for memory and regret for the character singing it.
They hear the rhythm, and it transports them back to a lost love.
The lyrics stretch out luxuriously, unlike the clipped, precise machine gun wit of his comic songs. The melody arcs very broadly. It evokes a cinematic scope.
He is using the exotic rhythm as a foundational pillar to build a profound, atmospheric, emotional experience.
It proves his compositional ambition. And the text notes its massive success as a popular standard, especially Artie Shaw's big band instrumental version during the swing era.
Which confirms his unique ability to innovate and push the strict boundaries of what a commercial song could be, while still maintaining absolute mass appeal. People didn't care that it was 108 bars long. They just loved it.
And from that sweeping exoticism, the text guides us to a much later point in his career to show how this emotional capacity matured over time.
We move to 1948, to the masterpiece musical Kiss Me, Kate, and the song So in Love. The document calls this the operatic Broadway ballad.
This is a late career triumph. The text uses the phrase Puccini-esque breath to describe the melody.
What makes it operatic isn't just that it's sung loudly, it's the sheer vocal range it demands and the emotional nakedness it requires.
It is completely vulnerable. The lyric, So in Love with You Am I, is just raw, sweeping, unadorned intensity.
But wait, how does this compare to Night and Day? Because we established that Night and Day was also raw, unadorned emotional intensity. Is he just repeating himself 16 years later?
That is exactly the question the source material anticipates. It makes a brilliant comparison between the two.
Let's hear it.
If the earlier song, Night and Day from 1932, was entirely about obsession, that ticking clock fixation, the neurotic need to possess someone.
So In Love, written in 1948, is about resignation.
Yes. It is about a deep grounding, an acceptance of pain, and ultimate surrender to the feeling.
The voice is seasoned.
Exactly. It reflects a composer who has experienced life. By 1948, Porter had experienced massive triumph, but also severe physical hardship following a horrific horseback riding accident that left him in chronic pain for the rest of his life.
You can hear that lived experience in the music. The emotional stakes are higher, but the perspective is wiser.
It proves something vital about Porter as an artist. As the text explicitly states, he didn't calcify as he aged.
So many brilliant writers find their hit formula in their 20s or 30s, and they just rewrite that exact same song for the rest of their lives, just changing the title.
Porter let his musical language deepen. He let his emotional perspective broaden. He allowed himself to grow old musically.
That evolution is the hallmark of a true dramatist. He proves he's capable of profound feeling that serves a serious narrative purpose.
So In Love isn't just a decorative pop song. It carries massive dramatic weight within the complex story of Kiss Me, Kate.
Okay, so we've seen him do witty, obsessive, urban, exotic, and operatic. You'd think that covers the entire conceivable spectrum of the human experience.
But we have one more stop in the gallery.
And this might be my absolute favorite part of the document, because it highlights just how funny and adaptable he could be when writing for specific, ridiculous characters.
The song in focus here is also from Kiss Me, Kate. It's Brush Up Your Shakespeare, which the text categorizes as his great character comedy song.
The setup alone is pure theatrical gold. You have these two literal comic gangsters, low-life crooks, heavies, guys who break legs for a living, who wander out onto the stage and advise men on how to woo women.
And their earnest advice is to quote the works of William Shakespeare.
The juxtaposition is brilliant. You have these rough, unrefined, stereotypical tough guys praising the absolute pinnacle of high English culture, but doing it entirely for the crass purpose of romantic seduction.
And the lyric is just packed end to end with outrageous double entendres and tortured rhymes.
They rhyme Othello with a hellofellow. They rhyme Coriolanus with, well, something you shouldn't say in polite company.
It's hilarious. It's written in a waltz time, which makes it even funnier, these two thugs waltzing around the stage.
But the text doesn't just point out that it's a funny novelty song. It gives us the real insight into why this song matters in the argument for his greatness. The source uses this incredible phrase, dramatic ventriloquism.
This raises a vital point about his skill as a true man of the theater. Writing in the voices of uneducated gangsters proves that he isn't just writing as Cole Porter, the sophisticated Yale millionaire.
He isn't just projecting his own glittering personality onto the stage in every scene.
He can craft highly distinct character voices that are tailored to the specific theatrical needs of the plot.
Think about the distance there. The gangsters in Brush Up Your Shakespeare sound entirely, fundamentally distinct from the desperate, tragic lovers in So in Love.
Who sound entirely distinct from the cynical New Yorker in I Get a Kick Out of You.
That multiplicity of voices is exactly what separates a good songwriter from a great theatrical dramatist. He is essentially throwing his voice into these different bodies and making every single one of them sound authentic and brilliant in their own unique idiom.
And that concludes the gallery of 7 songs provided by the source.
The document states that, taken together, this suite of music proves a command over multiple tonal registers and structural forms that is unmatched.
It proves he balanced mass popularity with elite sophistication and seamlessly fused lyric and melody.
But, and this is a big but, the author of this document knows that to claim Porter is the absolute greatest of the 20th century, you can't just look at his work in a vacuum.
You have to put him in the ring with the other heavyweights of the era.
You have to prove he can beat them at their own game. And that brings us to the most rigorous part of the text, the Pantheon Showdown, Porter versus the Giants.
This is where the structural argument of the source material becomes incredibly sharp. To argue true supremacy, the text systematically measures Porter against 5 legendary contemporaries.
I feel like we need a boxing announcer for this section in the red corner. No, but seriously, this is the ultimate heavyweight title match of American music.
It really is.
I want to really dig into these specific matchups because I have some notes. Let's start with a true titan, Porter versus Irving Berlin. The text frames this as sophistication versus simplicity.
Irving Berlin is rightfully described in the document as the embodiment of American populism. His songs achieved a universal appeal that is almost unparalleled in human history.
The source specifically points to White Christmas and God Bless America as the ultimate examples of this.
Berlin's genius was direct emotional clarity and simple, undeniable melodic design. His music felt inevitable, emotionally transparent, and incredibly accessible to absolutely everyone, regardless of their education level.
Okay, I'm going to play defense for Irving Berlin here. Isn't there an argument that Berlin's utter simplicity is actually harder to achieve than Porter's dense complexity?
How so?
Stripping a song down to its absolute emotional core without hiding behind clever internal rhymes or fancy French phrases, just saying I love you and making the whole world cry, why does Porter win this matchup?
It is a completely fair question. And let's be clear, the document is not trying to tear Berlin down. Berlin was an undisputed genius.
But the text outlines the Porter advantage.
It notes that Berlin's musical language, for all its emotional beauty, remained relatively narrow. His harmonic vocabulary was conservative. He famously only played piano in 1 key.
And his lyrics were highly effective, but they rarely pursued the intricate, dense literary complexity that we've been analyzing.
Where Berlin sought universality in plain speech, Porter sought elegance, dazzle, and intellectual surprise.
So it's about the technical demands of the work.
Exactly. The source argues that Porter's work demanded a broader technical mastery. He was dealing with dense AABB rhyme schemes, biting cultural satire, and complex, shifting harmonic movement.
If Berlin represents the heart of American populism, Porter represents the height of American cosmopolitanism.
And because Porter was writing both the complex music and the complex lyrics, the artistic enterprise was arguably more technically demanding.
It's like comparing a perfect, heartbreakingly simple folktale to a brilliantly plotted, multi-layered satirical novel. Both can be masterpieces, but the novel requires a different, arguably larger set of technical tools to keep from collapsing under its own weight.
That's a great analogy.
All right, round 2. Porter versus George Gershwin. The text calls this integration versus innovation. Now, George Gershwin's legacy is undeniable. Rhapsody in Blue, the opera Porgy and Bess.
The source fully acknowledges that Gershwin revolutionized American music by blending jazz with classical forms. He completely reshaped the sonic landscape of the country.
His harmonic language and rhythmic drive were truly innovative. He changed the actual sound of the 20th century.
So how on earth does Porter beat the guy who wrote Rhapsody in Blue? If Gershwin is writing full-scale operas, doesn't he win the complexity argument?
Here is the critical distinction, the Porter advantage in this matchup. The brilliance of Gershwin's songs almost always emerged from a partnership.
He relied heavily on his brother, Ira Gershwin, for the lyrics.
The text argues that while Gershwin changed music itself, Porter's solo, unified authorship achieved a rare integration of language and melody shaped by a single artistic vision.
But wait, I have to push back again. If Porgy and Bess is considered the great American opera, how can we say Porter's solo authorship inherently beats that collaboration? doesn't a great partnership sometimes yield something bigger than a single mind? Look at Lennon and McCartney.
It can, certainly. But the document isn't saying Gershwin's output is lesser in cultural value. It's arguing from a standpoint of structural marvel.
Imagine one person designing the blueprints of a cathedral, hand-carving the stained glass, and composing the choir music.
That's the Porter advantage. It's the unified DNA.
Furthermore, Gershwin's style, while highly innovative, was relatively consistent. You generally know when you are listening to a Gershwin piece, it has that specific bluesy, jazzy DNA.
Porter's style, as we've seen in our gallery walk, shifted dramatically from song to song depending on the dramatic need.
The document concludes this point by stating, where Gershwin changed music, Porter demonstrated total compositional control.
Total compositional control. That is a mic drop sentence right there.
It really is.
Okay, moving on to the third bout. Porter versus Jerome Kern. The framing here is naturalism versus artifice.
Now, Jerome Kern was the pioneer of dramatic realism in musical theater.
The text highlights how he, particularly with works like the groundbreaking Showboat in 1927, pushed the art form towards psychological depth and dramatic coherence.
Kern wanted the song to serve the character's emotional truth as realistically as possible. His melodies feel organic.
And his lyrical style prioritized natural expression and natural speech. He wanted it to sound like a real person talking, just elevated.
And I love how the text contrasts this. The Porter advantage isn't that Porter was more realistic than Kern, it's that he embraced the exact opposite approach.
Porter embraced heightened theatrical artifice.
He wasn't trying to sound like people talk on the street. He crafted lyrics of extraordinary formal complexity that nobody would ever actually say in real life.
It represents two entirely different visions of what musical theater can be. Kern sought truth through realism. Porter sought truth through style.
And the source argues that Porter's approach is arguably more technically demanding to sustain.
Right.
Why? Because his songs had to satisfy the dramatic function of the scene, they still had to move the plot forward while simultaneously sustaining that incredible formal linguistic complexity.
It is much harder to be emotionally truthful when you are forcing yourself to rhyme museum with Colosseum.
It's the difference between a gritty, handheld documentary and a highly stylized, beautifully lit film noir.
Both can tell the truth about human nature, but the noir requires you to master the shadows, the lighting, the angles. You have to master the artifice to reveal the truth.
Okay, matchup number 4. Porter versus Richard Rodgers. This is framed as melody versus language.
Richard Rodgers is credited in the text with producing some of Broadway's greatest, most memorable melodies. Oklahoma, Carousel, The Sound of Music.
His gift was an unmatched melodic generosity. His tunes just flow beautifully and inevitably.
But similar to Gershwin, Rodgers depended entirely on collaborative partnerships. First with the brilliant, cynical lyricist Lorenz Hart, and later with the earnest, dramatic Oscar Hammerstein II.
To help define the modern integrated musical.
Now, Rodgers and Hammerstein basically invented the modern musical as we know it. They integrated dance, story, and song perfectly. How does Porter overcome that legacy?
This is where the text really drives home the dual mastery argument. The Porter advantage here is staggering when you break it down.
The source claims that Porter's lyrics rivaled the legendary verbal wit of Lorenz Hart, who is known as the cleverest rhymer in the business. And simultaneously, his melodies rivaled the sweeping, romantic richness of Richard Rodgers.
He was doing both of their jobs at the highest possible level at the exact same time.
The document puts it perfectly. Rodgers helped invent the integrated musical, but Porter showed what an integrated songwriter could accomplish completely alone.
It is a level of self-sufficiency that is almost unheard of at that tier of quality. It's like being both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Okay, the final matchup. This brings us to a slightly later era, but it's a crucial comparison for modern listeners. Porter versus Stephen Sondheim. The text calls this influence versus accessibility.
Stephen Sondheim is recognized in the text as perhaps the only later figure whose lyrical and musical ambition truly rivals Porter's.
And Sondheim openly acknowledged Porter's massive influence on him.
Sondheim took Porter's core ideas, that lyrics could be relentlessly intellectually complex, that internal rhymes could define a character's neuroses, and push them even further into deep, dark psychological territory.
Sondheim is the intellectual giant of the late 20th century. Sweeney Todd Company. The lyrical puzzles he created are mind-bending. So does the student surpass the master here.
The Porter advantage here is entirely about the audience. The text observes that Sondheim, in his pursuit of that deep, uncompromising psychological complexity, often sacrificed popular appeal.
His works are universally acknowledged as brilliant, But they aren't always universally accessible to the casual listener. You rarely hear a song from Pacific Overtures playing at a grocery store or a wedding reception.
And Porter achieved what the text calls the impossible balance. He created high art, intellectually complex art, with labyrinthine rhyme schemes and sophisticated harmonies that was also massively popular.
His songs were sung casually by people who had no idea what the Colosseum was. They were massive radio hits. They were everywhere.
He achieved elite sophistication without alienation. He never lost the populist touch.
Which brings us naturally to the final major point of our analysis, looking at the ultimate test of his work. Because that massive accessibility is exactly what allowed his music to endure long after the original Broadway shows closed.
The core information here is about longevity. Porter's songs didn't just stay trapped on the Broadway stage, gathering dust in the archives.
They had incredible legs. They migrated effortlessly into what we now call the Great American Songbook. They became foundational texts in jazz clubs.
They were used in Hollywood films, and they are constantly, to this day, revived in modern popular recordings by singers across every single generation, from Frank Sinatra to Ella Fitzgerald to Lady Gaga.
The source makes a fascinating analytical point about this migration. It states that this cross-genre survival is undeniable proof of their underlying structural strength.
Because a Porter song is so incredibly well built, because the architecture of the lyric and the harmony is so solid, it functions entirely independently of its original source material.
You don't need to know the farcical plot of the musical. Anything goes to feel the emotional impact of the song. I get a kick out of you.
The song survives on its own merits as a perfect miniature piece of dramatic art.
So bringing this all together for you, the listener, we've walked through the gallery, we've watched the heavyweight boxing match. Why does this matter? Why does flexibility, this art of range, equal absolute greatness?
In musical theater, as the text bluntly states, monotony kills drama. If every song sounds the same, if every character has the same vocabulary and the same harmonic structure, the audience checks out.
A composer has to serve different characters, different high-stakes situations, and different emotional moods. Porter could score an entire evening, a whole two-act musical, without ever repeating himself.
And he could do that because, as the document beautifully concludes, he had synthesized the strengths of all those giants we just debated.
He had Irving Berlin's mass popularity, he had George Gershwin's harmonic sophistication, he had Jerome Kern's theatricality, he had Richard Rodgers' musical richness, and he had Stephen Sondheim's verbal wit, all wrapped into one single unified mind.
Yet, despite holding all those massive influences, he remained unmistakably entirely himself.
It's like he was the ultimate musical chameleon, but a chameleon with a very specific, undeniable, sparkling DNA.
Exactly. His flexibility wasn't a cheap party trick or a mere diffusion of a talent. It was the ultimate tool for dramatic storytelling. It was evidence of complete, absolute mastery over the language of his art form.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's just take a breath and recap the sheer distance we've traveled through the source material.
We started with the witty, mischievous, Ivy League decadence of Let's Do It, where we're rhyming about educated fleas and masking sexual desire with high society jokes.
And we ended up exploring this sweeping, Puccini-esque operatic surrender of So in Love. And we hit obsessive, ticking clock longing, urban jazz restraint, and character-driven gangster comedy all in between.
It is a breathtaking gallery of distinct artistic voices, unified only by that consistent technical precision and relentless cultural intelligence.
I have to say, really breaking down this source material has completely changed the way I listen to standard pop songs today.
Oh, absolutely.
When you hear what a truly unified author, someone who writes both the music and the lyrics with this terrifying level of genius, can do, you realize it's somewhat of a lost art.
You listen to modern hits today, which often have 6, 7, or 8 writers and producers credited on a single 3-minute track, each handling a different beat or a different hook, and you realize how incredibly rare Porter's singular, cohesive vision actually was.
It certainly sets an impossibly high bar for modern songwriters, and it leaves us with a lot to consider regarding how we view artistic identity.
Which leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with. A little something for you to mull over or explore on your own that builds on what we've talked about today, but wasn't explicitly answered in the text.
Let's hear it.
We've established that Cole Porter's unique genius was his ability to put on so many different musical masks. The world-weary cynic, the desperate romantic, the uneducated gangster, the sparkling aristocrat. He could throw his voice perfectly.
So what does that say about the fractured nature of 20th century identity?
Was his ability to wear so many masks a reflection of a society that was increasingly wearing different masks in different situations, torn between the old world and the modern era?
And taking it a step further into our current world, if a mind exactly like Cole Porter's existed today, right now, would he even be writing for the Broadway stage?
Or would a chameleon of his caliber, with that kind of intense cultural intelligence and structural mastery, be using the digital age to invent entirely new, uncrackable personas across different mediums?
Would he be anonymous online? Would he be a multi-genre producer hiding behind different avatars? It's fascinating to think about where that specific shape-shifting type of genius would land today.
It's a brilliant question. The medium might change, the technology might evolve, but the art of the mask and the genius required to wear it remains.
Something to think about the next time you hear a brilliant lyric that gets stuck in your head night and day. Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive exploration of the source material on Porter-Pedia. We will see you next time.